Welcome to Ritual Scale Modelling. This is part 6 of the Airfix Hellcat Scale 1 to 24 build. In part 5, I finished off the infrastructure with the main wings, added some extra parts to the fuselage. In part 6, I'm carrying on with that work, but concentrating on the rear wings and the tail. So let's get on with this. So now the wings are dry, well the wing is dry on the main part of the fuselage here. There's just a couple of little brackets to put in where the landing gear goes. This is just a mount, I think, and it just fits right in the edge. There's a little recess point that runs from the sidewall into the into the bottom well. Obviously on the other wing I don't have that bottom well, so if you're doing it the way I'm doing it, do the one that's in situ first so you know exactly where this part is going to go. The rear wing is made of very simple components. You have your two main parts, the fixed part of the wing and the flap. Now the flap you can have as a free movement, or you can cement it up so it doesn't move at all and have the mine free moving on this side. So when I'm putting in the bracket to hold the flap, just make sure you're not putting any cement next to the actual area where the flap is going to go, because obviously you don't want it to be bunged up and not be able to move. So it's just a matter of lining up the flap here and placing it on, just checking to make sure it is going to move. You will need a couple of clamps here as well, just to hold it in place. You may not want to clamp it if you're worried about the pressure of the clamp will push it out slightly, but the location pins in it will actually stop that. So I know sometimes when you can clamp up wings, especially in the older kits, it can push them out of alignment slightly and you end up having to file them down to get them back into alignment. So now that the flap is made up, it's just a matter of placing the bracket into the main wing. Again, with the cement, only put a little bit of cement down the recess point that runs along that holds the bracket. Try not to put in too much. You may prefer to use Tamiya extra thin glue for this process for better control. Once that's done, again, check for free movement before closing up the main wing. And it goes without saying, just be careful when you're doing it, because you don't want to be touching the bracket with the glue unknowingly, then realizing that the thing has been glued up by mistake. For the second wing, obviously there's no infrastructure for this wing. It's just a straight wing, so it's something I'm going to have to scratch build. So I'm just pointing there where I need the beams or struts to come out of. I'm anchoring them on the actual area where the wing would sit inside. So I'm just measuring up how the length that I need. Bear in mind, what I do there is I measure the wing and then add on a length so that it's going to anchor itself into the recess area where the other wing is going to be attached. I think I added about 5mm, maybe 7mm extra. If you're unsure, just lay your wing against the area and use your ruler, and you'll see how much you need to leave to do this. So once I've got the measurement, it's just a matter of tracing it on my bit of plastic card and cutting a strip off. So once I've got my first part cut, I'm just test fitting it to make sure it's going to look alright. Now I'm adding it to the wing to see if I've got the length correctly. And so I'm putting this in such a way that the wing, I'll just turn my light on there, it would be, imagine it's on the second part of the fuselage, and just laying the strip of plastic card there and making sure I've got enough length. It's always better to have too much than not enough, that way you can trim it down. So now I've got my two main beams. I've skewed it to my cutting mat with a bit of Tamiya tape, and I'm using my pin drive now to create little holes in the strip. Now these holes are tiny, they are quite small because obviously it's a small part, so you are going to need a thin drill bit to do this. Now I've cut the tape to release the part, and as you see I've wrapped the tape around the screw. This is just to create depth in the actual beam itself. And what I'm doing, like I always do to open up a hole, I place my hobby knife in and just twist it around until I get the desired diameter of hole. Doing it this way, you gradually open it up, and you can see whether you're getting too close to the edge or not when you're doing it. But just be careful. One, you don't want to cut yourself, and two, you don't want to do it too much and break the beam. So next is to put the cross beams in. So I'm starting off with the far end, because this is the smallest part of the cross beam. So again, it's just a little piece of plastic card, and it's just a straight cement on both sides to create the cross beam. I then do the same process again with the opposite end, but this time it's a wider piece of card, so it's longer, I should say, not wider. That's obviously because of the shape of the wing, it will open up. And this cross beam as well, I've added the holes into it as well. I didn't do it on the first one because I thought it was a bit too small, but all the beams, cross beams from here on in, will have these weight saving holes that aircraft have. And now I'm using the kit part here, and I'm just placing on the bracket that would hold the flap. Now this side won't have any of the flaps on, but it will have the bracket. So it's just very simple. I put a little bit of cement on and glued it to the side of the framework. And once it's set, it's 99 aluminium by Rebel Aquacolor, and I'm using this all over the framework. I'm moving over to the tail now, and first of all the flap goes in, and that's painted in Rebel Aquacolor 66 Olive Grey, which will be one of the main colours of the fuselage. And next is to place in the bracket. After that, I gave it a coat of the main colour for the interior, which is Tamiya's XF71 Cockpit Green. Now the reason why I'm doing this now is because I've got to fit in a little bit of framework in here, and I'm using bits of excess plastic card that I've already painted and worked on through the main wing. So I'm using the scrap material really, and I'm just placing in little parts of grid work to simulate the inside of it. There's no specific pattern that I'm using here. I'm just going with what feels right and what looks right. And there's nothing special, it's just strips of plastic card painted like the rest of the frame and placed on inside the inner part of the tail. So as you can see here, it's almost done now, just taking shape. Try and get them as straight as possible, so you don't want them to sort of lean into each other. I found out a couple of times when I've done it, it can look a bit wrong. So as I said, there's no specific pattern to this. Just do what you think will actually look right. Now it's time to attach the actual framework of the wing, and as I said at the beginning of it, it's getting placed where the recess point of the opposite wing is going. So the beams are just going down the side of the raised plastic there. I'm using a little bit of cut sprue just to hold it in position. That will later get covered up by another beam of plasticard to make it look like the framework which I'm putting in now. Again, it's just a simple strip laying over the joint, and that's the key to doing this, just strips of plastic. You don't have to do anything fancy for it to simulate interior of an aircraft or anything else. Just strips of plastic cut down to length and placed in a way that looks like the grid work for the interior. The last to go on for this part is the actual tail fin now. Oops, that's just moved off. I haven't got that attached properly. It just fits under the bracket and the little recess point, so it's a little bit tricky at this point to get it in, but it's better to put it in last than try and get it in while you're putting the bracket on. So I've decided to add a couple of extra strips along the exposed fuselage here. I'm not sure whether the actual aircraft would have this or not, but I think it makes more sense that it would have these supporting beams. So I've decided to put them in. It's just two strips of plasticard, and it's running along the bulkheads. I'm glad now I put in the extra bulkhead to do this, or I wouldn't have done it. But one of the main reasons I did do this was because on the tail end of the bulkhead there's 4 little pins that come out pointing towards the cockpit, and to me that suggests that there should be cross beams there, hence why I'm putting them in. I didn't put 4 in, I only put 2 in, the 2 that's going to be facing you, thinking that the other 2 would be flat against the fuselage anyway, so it wouldn't make much difference. Now it's back to the wing, so I'm just pushing on the main wing that's been made up, and this just fits right into the recess point. There's 2, there's the long part and also the little round one for the flap, and again it just fits in beautifully. You may need to hold it for a couple of seconds, but it doesn't need much lining up at all. So then after that it's time to fix the main wing, and that just sits underneath the cockpit. The bulkhead sticks down from the opening there, so if you think that looks wrong, it's fine. It's how it actually is meant to look. There's a couple of location points here. One of them you may have to file down slightly, I did, for the recess hole, but it was such a minor thing to do. I didn't bother showing it. There's a couple of passes over the file. So now I'm going to change the colour of the side of the bulkheads from the green to the aluminium colour. This is just keeping in with the framework of the wings and the bulkhead strips I placed on. And then I'm weathering it using Tamiya's Weather Master Series D, and I'm using the burnt red and oil components here to match up with the framework of the wing. And then it's time to put in the second main wing. I'm not gluing it at this point. I may need to move it around later on in the build. Well, this will bring part 6 to a close. In part 7 I'm going to be starting on the engine and the engine block, so that's going to be fun to start with. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the rest of the builds for this build, and then check out the rest of the channel. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for any upcoming updates, and of course you can leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.